heckle like this one here, or this one here, or this one here, to a medium fine one like this, it's going to separate the fibers ever finer and finer. You can also draw this through an ultra-fine comb. This particular flax heckle was made in 1828. These are shorter tow fibers. They also could be used for spinning and weaving. The very shortest waste fibers in today's flax industry are used for paper making. The highest quality of handmade paper in the past and earlier centuries, however, would have been obtained from people who would collect rags. And these rags would be sorted out in terms of the highest quality, medium quality, to the poorest quality. And you never could find enough rags for the making of paper.
The pulp from Helmut Becker's Field of Flax won't become sheets of paper. Eventually it will be part of Sun Structures, the acclaimed collection of Helmut Becker's paperworks.
I'm quite interested in how nature seeks its own tensions, and what happens when things dry naturally and assume their tensions, like convolutions, things that will convolute in or out in terms of convex, concave. Things like that interest me even more than restraining it into a flat surface, which much of conventional paper making really has been. The sculptural surface, in that sense, excites me even more. This was lying on my lawn, so I'll let part of the grass that was just simply growing through that become part of the final work. I'm a sun worshiper, and so this is part of a sun image. One of the last plants to blossom on the edge of my property are some wild sunflowers. First, I'm going to put down a very thin but strong cloth. When some of the water, the handmade paper pulp, is poured on this, this is going to conform to the exacting details of the screen. And now I'll put the grass back roughly where it was. I'll just try these out. Since I'm working directly with materials, I'm sketching, painting directly with these, so in this case I'm delineating some lines that are going to radiate out from the center. These, along with some flax yarn and thread, will also give the work a structural strength. I'm weighing out some of the water-retted green pulled flax from the summer, and I'm going to add it to the Hollander paper beater. Because it's so very fine, I really wouldn't even need to cut this. I could just simply take it and roll it into a small ball like this and add it to the beater. That way you're going to sustain the maximum strength of the fiber by not cutting it at all. I'm going to pour some flax down onto this, some flax paper, before I put those back on there. So I'll just put them aside here. This is some inner bark from trees. These I boil with soda ash to remove the non-cellulose material. This is line flax. What I'm going to do is just hand spin using a fairly primitive device just to clamp this in place here. What I'll do is just spin this to give it some strength, and by dampening it in some of the paper pulp, it's going to have yet more strength than it had just dry. I'll just hand weave some of these in and out of the wild sunflower stalks. The fiber flax paper, when it dries, has tremendous strength, so it will almost be like leather or like hides, except when they shrink, they're going to create a certain tautness as well. But the fact that there are things that are intercepting here are going to restrain the directions in which it can shrink. I'm going to add some more pulp over some strategic areas here to get this to tie structurally together. When I've completed pouring and forming the work, I'll drain off the extra water here, and because the stainless steel screen underneath this is quite strong, I'll be able to skid some supports underneath this and lift it carefully off of here so that the wind, the sun, and the air can get at both sides, underneath and on top. And if it rains, I might even see what happens if some of the tension is modified by rain falling through it, as it's doing right now. I may move it into my barn temporarily until there are a few windy days. I'll just leave it out in the elements to find its own tensions, so that it will maybe take 3-4 days, maybe a week to thoroughly dry. If the sun is out, there might be a slight bleaching factor. It would take many weeks in the sun for a critical bleaching to occur, so that many of the natural colors that we see here are going to remain somewhat intact.
It's appropriate that the latest exhibition of sun structures is at the Museum of Indian Archaeology. From earliest childhood, Helmut Becker's strongest influence has been the history, lifestyles, and philosophies of North America's Aboriginal peoples.
I felt the work needed to live with nature for a spell. As a result, rain or two fell on it, which inevitably created watermarks. These might result in a sector of it having a window, a see-through sector. This might help the fan-shaped structure to just simply breathe a little more easily. Sometimes in the fine arts, it's necessary to leave something very important out. Also, to relate it to the longhouse, it would have been too busy or too active if I had left the three-dimensionality of the somewhat chance erratic placement of the sunflower stalks where I put them. So some of them are semi there, and it has left a simplified statement that could merge in with that of the longhouse. There are dozens of different ways in which you can form a handmade paper. It doesn't necessarily need to be formed with a decal mold, a screen. A number of the sectors were hand formed with a large stainless steel screen, a decal mold, some with a much finer phosphor bronze screen. Others were poured. A few I just simply cast, for example, on sand or on a surface like bark that I had dusted or powdered with graphite. The basic idea for the sundial, it follows the drawing or diagram for an ancient Druid sundial. The energy in the universe, our sun, for example, to me is something very dynamic. Without that, life forms would cease. And so, in essence, because I'm very interested in plants, the sun makes plants grow. The carbon stays in the cellulose. The cellulose, in terms of chemistry, is 6 atoms of carbon, 10 atoms of hydrogen, 5 atoms of oxygen. Very simple, and yet by comparison to glucose or sugar, it's just a change of an atom or so, and suddenly you have something which, under museum conditions of temperature, humidity control, can last for centuries, if not millenniums, if you consider the linens that have survived from ancient Egypt.